it's where being married, I want to say almost fueled the addiction.
Yeah.
Break that down. Why do you feel that way?
Because when you're home with your parents, you know, you can only do so much. But when you're in your own home, right?
Yeah.
It's different because now that space belongs to you. Now
Right.
you have
My
more
house.
freedom, especially if you don't have kids, which we didn't at the time.
Yeah.
And if, let's say, she's working or whatever, I'm alone for whatever reason, that space is mine. So that desire is now fueled.
And same with
now,
mine.
Yeah, now it's that now I have my own personal space,
Yeah.
my own personal home where I can hide, where I can be more secretive, where I can do things at a greater level, you know.
Yeah.
Because it's my own home. Nobody knows what I'm doing. And it's like that, you know, it's your house. You can do whatever you want inside your house, kind of thing.
Right.
And that's why being married together actually fueled, you know, it took that addiction even further. And it got worse because of that, because I allowed it, and because we knew what we were doing. And we were okay with it. I was okay with it. You know.
When did it become, unless you might go into that now, what drew the line of, okay, we can't be okay with this?
That's the whole baseline of why our marriage almost broke.
Yeah.
Okay.
But before we get there, I do want to say that this is the way that I was living for so long.
Yeah.
You know, for so many years I've had this thing that I was just entangled with.
Yeah.
So, and the thing about it is I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know, my spirit felt cold. You know, I was a Christian. I was doing the Christian thing. I was going to church. I was worshiping. I was
And that was the whole thing I never understood.
Yeah, and I was in ministry.
I never
on
understood
top
how
of
he
that.
could have two lives.
You know?
Because I knew what he was doing. And I knew his personality at home. And I knew his personality at church. And it was almost as if he had like a split personality. And yeah.
And like I said, I was even involved in ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I hated myself for that because I didn't understand how I could love the Lord, how I could do the Christian thing,
Yeah.
but at the same time how I could also be living this life of pornography and addiction and talking to women, now being married, talking to women behind my wife's back.
Yeah.
You know, and I hated myself for it. And there was always that thing where God would throw a little bit of conviction my way, and I had enough conviction to let people go. I've actually done that because the power of conviction, you know. Yes. I've actually ended relationships. I said, we can't do this no more. This is not right. We're done. I'm a married man. We're done. But that only lasted for so long. Because eventually the desire goes back. It's an addiction, right? So the desire goes back, and then again the so easy to find people to do this stuff with.
Yeah.
So you just go on. I went online. You just go online and you find
Somebody else,
and new friendship forms.
So at that point, were you more addicted to meeting people more than the pornography itself?
Absolutely, yeah.
So it became more so I want to just meet people.
Yeah,
and
because now
became like the last.
Now I was getting pornography through people. If that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's not just some fake thing. Now this is a real person, right?
That which drives now that addiction, that craving even
right.
more.
Now you're
talking to somebody.
You're having this friendship. And again, my home, I could do what I want, you know. And the enemy works in such a way where it's like whispers lies to you, where it's like, this is your house, dude.
Yeah.
You know, you're the boss. You know, you're the man of the house. Yeah. You lead the way you want to lead. And when you start listening to those things, and you're struggling with this addiction, that's a recipe for disaster, man. because that would just bring the pornography and all that. It fuels it in such a way where just like you just want to talk to more and more and more people.
Right.
And eventually, the mistake that I did was having the Bible study the way that I had it, because 90% of the people, the young adults that were there, were women, were young ladies.
Oh, this was Bible study in your
Bible
house?
study, yeah.
Oh,
Over
okay.
Zoom.
Over Zoom.
Oh,
Zoom
over
Bible
Zoom.
study.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But most of them were women.
Most of them were. I probably had like one or two guys there.
And you were leading the Bible study?
Mhm.
I was hosting the Bible study.
Okay.
And this is something again that I didn't understand, because God clearly showed up in those Bible studies. You know, I've had messages from these young ladies that say, the Lord spoke in such a way through your message, and I couldn't really understand, like, again, the battle, like, how could God use me when I am in this much darkness, right? When my spirit feels cold, when I feel like every time that I do this, I'm falling down deeper into the pit. How could I, as a Christian who loves the Lord, because I do love the Lord, I always did, but then I'm like, I hated myself because I always found myself falling into this sin, you know, into talking to women now behind Kirsten's back, and the Bible study, I held on. I've never acted on any of them, until the very, very last. And that was like towards the end of when everything happened. Because I swore to myself that those were my people. Like, I wouldn't let myself get to that place. Like, I wouldn't harm them. I wouldn't talk to them in that manner. You know, they were my group, right? I wouldn't dare myself do anything evil to them.
This was a mentality of, well, going back to when you say like two different lives, right? You know, hey, in this life right now, like, I will never let my addiction enter into this space.
Yes.
Like, my addiction's my addiction. That's my, you know, this
That
is not.
spot is over there.
But I will never bring that into the church.
Correct.
And this is the moment where it's so
It
deep,
did.
and now it's starting to fuse into this.
That
Wow.
event, yeah. So I was able to hold on for so long because, you know, I cared for them, like, and I genuinely did care for them. You know, it's not like I hosted the Bible study for malintentions. You know, I did not. I loved the Lord. I loved what I was doing, but that was a major red flag. 90% women, 1 male leading the Bible study. It's not the way it should be. You know, at the very least, it should have been us. You know.
Oh, you were not in those.
I was
She was not.
I was locked out of the room.
It was not.
He was behind closed doors, locked. I was not allowed in the room.
Yeah. So again, the Bible study wasn't something that I did anything with anybody. It was genuinely, it was a Bible study. Every week we did have Bible study.
Yeah, I remember you sharing that with me a while back.
Yeah.
I think you extended out an invitation once. Yeah, I remember that.
It was going really well, although not the proper way to do it, but it was going really well, because I had shielded them from my addiction, from my problems, until closer to the end, where I actually found myself having this type of conversation with one of the girls there.
And can I just ask this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned that you were not in the Bible study. Why is that?
He wouldn't let me.
Oh, okay.
He wouldn't let me. I tried. I would ask every once in a while, hey, you want to host me? He wouldn't let me.
What? And if you don't mind me asking, Victor, why did you want her not to be in the Bible study?
It wasn't for anything that I wanted to keep because I was doing something evil or anything like that or sinning. I think in my mind at that time this was my ministry, and you know, mine alone. I didn't want to share it.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
so that was like another thing added on to the problem. You know.
Absolutely.
and that's when ministry becomes unhealthy. You know, when ministry starts taking over your life and you start catering more to ministry than your own family, than your own wife, than your own kids, then it becomes a problem.
Right.
And that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
So I made ministry my family, especially the Bible study. They became like priority.
Yeah.
You know?
He had to do this every Thursday. It had to be done. I was not allowed anywhere near it, but it had to be done.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
and so towards the end of everything, like I said, I had that conversation. I was having that conversation with one of the girls there.
This is separate from, like, this is one-on-one with that particular person?
With one of the girls, yeah, on the Zoom. Yeah. But the thing about the Zoom Bible studies is I also had, I either had their Instagram, because we had an Instagram group chat for the Bible study. So I had everybody's handle. So that's how that went about. I had their Instagram handles, and some of them I had their Snapchat handles, you know.
Yeah.
You had their emails too.
Their emails, yeah. So the access was easy, you know.
Right.
And eventually what I swore would never happen, I don't know how, but that's just the way the enemy works.
Right.
You know, he tempts you with your problems, and then you find yourself talking in a certain way. You know, it starts off small because you're almost like testing the waters.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with pornography. You do it for so long, you almost become an expert of how to talk people into doing certain things.
Wow.
And it's
Wow,
like
that's real.
you're involved in your own darkness, man, and you do it for so long, you become experienced. You've seen how this affects people. You've seen it in videos. You've seen it in how just to have that conversation. Pornography pretty much teaches you the dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you get to have these dialogues with other people. And so, unfortunately, I let it get to one of the girls. And she did what she said she wouldn't do.
She did.
She did.
Okay.
She said what she wouldn't do. I said, well, nobody can know about what we just talked about. And she screenshotted, or I don't know what she did.
She told a friend who told me.
Actually, no, because
No?
the Bible study was two different. The Bible study was separate from that. I don't know if you remember that.
Okay, I think I do, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is where it gets
A little bit interesting.
a little bit interesting,
Wow.
because this happened like literally one day after. So while I was talking to one of the girls online, right, which is the friend that she's talking to, one of the girls that I was talking to online, her friend saw the conversation, and that friend found her Facebook and messaged her and
Wow.
said, this is what your husband is telling my friend.
Oh man.
Which is what the bombshell was.
Wow. Wow.
And the day after that was when the Bible study girl told the
Oh,
group.
yes, I remember that.
Yeah,
Oh.
she told the group what I had done.
But she was also involved in.
She was involved in the Bible study.
But she told him that she wouldn't do anything, and then
She told everyone.
told everyone.
And she,
But was she also, entertaining the conversations and stuff like that?
in a way, she was.
So it wasn't like you initiated and she went, oh no, what are you doing? I'm gonna go tell. It was like she kind of entertained.
She kind of entertained a little bit, and then and that's what kept me going, you know. And then the next day, she pulled a separate group on Instagram with everybody in the Bible study, and she
Told
said,
everyone.
She told everyone.
Oh my goodness.
So the day before,
I was at my mom's house
yeah,
when the bombshell went off.
So the day before that happened, and the next day that happened.
Yeah.
So it was a complete 48 hours of exposure.
Yeah.
Now everybody
knows. I know, everybody, his whole group knows.
The church.
And
Everybody knows.
no, not the church.
No, not the church. The church doesn't know.
Oh, okay.
Not yet.
The church
Once we
not
release
yet,
it-
anyway.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
They are gonna know now.
But at that time, it was her that knew,
Yeah.
and it was everybody in my Bible study that knew.
Yeah.
And I was at work when I got a phone call from one of the guys at the Bible study. Who
Oh, I
he
didn't know
did it-
this part.
Yeah, Riley. I think I told you.
Mm.
But
Swiss cheese.
one of
There we go, mate.
one of the guys at the Bible study called my phone. He never calls me, but he called my phone once. I was at work, so I didn't answer. He called my phone again. It went to voicemail, and he left me a voicemail. And pretty much that voicemail was like, "I know what you've done. You know, the whole Bible study knows what you've done." And then he went off and, you know, said whatever he needed to say. And
Wow.
that's how I found out that she had told everybody.
How did that make you feel at that moment?
That was like a complete stab, you know,
Yeah.
because my worst fear of letting it get that far, the group that I swore to protect, right? I failed at that, you know, and so now I immediately went on my Instagram ministry page where I had the group together, and I saw this person had left the chat, this person had left the chat, this person had left the chat, and then one by one they all left, and one by one they all blocked me. That was the end.
To this day.
That was the end of
To
it.
this day, you're still blocked.
Yeah, as far as I know, yeah. To
Yeah.
this day, I'm still blocked. And, you know, and it's just what could have been something beautiful, right? Had I done it the proper way, right? I was selfish. I let the addiction get to me, right? And I let ministry take over, you know, my family, my life.
Right.
And it brought complete destruction to the home.
Yeah.
And so when she found out, at first I wanted to tell her. I was trying to convince her not to say anything to anybody because I wanted to work it out with her. I didn't want her to tell her parents, but she needed to tell her parents, and I understood that.
Yeah.
You know, she
At
needed,
first I agreed.
Mhm.
At first I was, okay, let's figure this out. I won't say anything. But the more I sat in that space, the more I have to tell someone.
Yeah.
I can't just sit here like this. I gotta tell someone. And so I eventually told my mom. And I called her sobbing. Absolutely sobbing. And at first she didn't understand me. And because she was at a basketball game, of all places. She was at a basketball game with my little sister. And at first she didn't hear me. And then I said it again, and I said, Victor is cheating on me. And she's like, what? And then I said it again, Victor is cheating on me. And all right, she told me where she was, and she said, I'm gonna call you back. And in that space of calling back, we got into a little bit of a spat of, why did you tell her? You shouldn't have told her. Now you got to get out. He basically kicked me out of the house because I told my mom. And then when she called me back, she goes, do you feel safe? Do you want to leave? I can't stay. He's kicking me out. And so he's, okay, I'm coming. And she was there in an hour with my dad. And in that space of, and he's going to talk a little bit about it as well, I started packing my whole house. To this day, it still triggers me when I have to pack somebody. It still triggers me when I have to if I have a lot of things to bring with me, it still brings me into that space of my whole life lined up by the door.
Wow.
Because I had to bring my stuff, I had to bring Sophie's stuff, I had everything lined up. He was sitting on the couch and just watched me back and forth. Just watched me back and forth as I'm sobbing and packing my whole life. It was not a good spot.
Yeah, like she was saying, I remember sitting on the couch and just watching everything unfold. And I realized what I had done, you know, and it was 2 blows, man, back to back. Not only about the one friend that messaged her, but about the Bible study too. So when God exposed the one, he immediately exposed the other. He said, if you're gonna do this, if you're gonna continue, because there were warning signs. God did warn me.
And moments to just stop it right there.
Yeah, throughout the years, the conviction, the signs to stop, and I ignored them. I didn't want to listen.
Wow.
It was almost as if I felt invincible because I've been doing it for so long. You know, I felt like I've gotten away with this for so long now, with my parents, now with her. I've gotten away. I'm pretty much never going to get caught. And that's when God had to step in.
That's right.
When I became that stubborn, when I became that hard-headed, that I knew that I felt myself that big that I was never going to get caught.
Right.
God said, I'm going to stop you right there. And so in 48 hours, he exposed what I was doing all along. And not only that, he exposed what I was doing at the Bible study. In a way, and now I understand, I had to go through that because that needed to be ripped away from me as well. Because it got to the point where that was not of God. You know? So he completely exposed it all. You know? Now, and this is just amazing how God works, because now she left, and now the family that I had created with the Bible study, now they were gone at the same time.
So there was now nobody.
There was now nobody. Could you imagine if she had left, but I still had the Bible study?
Yeah.
You know, because they were already family number one, right?
It wouldn't have mattered if
Maybe
I was there.
the effect wouldn't have been as intense as it was. Maybe I wouldn't have cared that much.
Yeah, you would have just drowned yourself in ministry.
And where would that have left? But no, God knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Because back to back, I'm just floored till this day. Exposure number 1, then exposure number 2 with the Bible study, and together, I lost it all.
So now, once all that happened, this bombshell happens, you pack up, and now you're in your parents' home.
Yes.
And the Bible study's completely gone,
Yeah.
blocked, and now we don't even know, is this relationship even going to be a relationship? Was this, I'm assuming there was a sense of it being, this is probably it when you walked out that door.
Yeah. It crossed my mind. I did tell him that I didn't want a divorce in that space because I didn't want to 100% lose him. Because, and I'll tell you this, I know what he was capable of.
In a positive way?
Both. I lived with a man that was very, very angry at a lot of things. And it was like a switch. As soon as I said something, he was done and out, and the rest of the day it was awful. It was an awful day from the day I said something. And so in that space, even though I left and even though I asked him for a separation, I knew that that anger was going to come out. So I didn't want him, I knew what that anger is, he was capable of that anger. And so I told him, and when I said, I don't want a divorce, not yet. I need time to think about this. This was a lot of really bad things, and I needed time to think.
Right.
And so I took Sophie, who was confused out of her mind, the poor thing. And I said, Daddy needs to stay home, and we're gonna go to Gigi's house, and we're just gonna stay there for a little while. And every night she would ask me, where's Daddy? And I didn't have the answer. I didn't know. I didn't know. I had very little contact with him at that point. On purpose.
How long was that period?
Thank the Lord it was only 10 days.
Wow.
But it must have felt forever.
It felt like years.
Yeah.
It felt like years.
Yeah.
But it was only 10 days. And I know that people are probably going to view this as that's not the time. That's a very short time. Why only 10 days?
No.
Well, listen, I think the God we serve, he can heal immediately.
Yeah.
100%. That's the kind of God we serve, and God is not bound by time.
No.
So there are some things in Scripture we find where he intentionally gave time. I'm reminded of the story of his people wandering around the desert for 40 years.
Yeah.
That was a needed intentional time. And then you have moments where Jesus, someone was, sick.
The woman with the blood, just touch him.
Well, with the issue of blood, she was dealing with a problem, but as soon as she saw him, touched him, and she was healed immediately. So, listen, people can say 10 days, oh wow, that's only 10 days. But as my wife mentioned, what you are going through can feel like an eternity.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was the case with her, and that was also the case with me at home, being isolated.
At least I had family, he had nobody.
And that was my issue. After they had left, I had come home to an empty house. Right? And now the house felt dark. Spiritually, physically, any possible way you can think of. It felt empty, it felt lonely. And it was just me and my thoughts. I was isolated completely. And that's what the enemy wanted all along. It was at that point that he won.
He wanted you alone.
He wanted me alone. Now, obviously after that, I had no desires to do any of that anymore.
Wow.
Because...
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you would think that you lose everything. It's like you get into a deep, depression, and it's just like,
never mind.
Just gonna run to my...
To the thing that you've been doing all along, right? Yeah, and you would think that would be the case, but I was just so distraught. Like, I was just so, I guess, depressed that I didn't have that desire anymore. But that's how I knew that's where the enemy wanted me. He's like, I already got you where I want you. And you did this,
I actually said that to you.
Yeah. So...
I screamed that at you before I left.
So yeah, backtracking a little bit when she...
I did.
And that was when I was on the couch, and she turned around and she said, you did this. And when she said...
In absolute physical shaking tears, I screamed at him, you did this.
And that echoed throughout the time that I was alone. Now imagine hearing that in a house that's alone, dark, and you just hear that repeatedly in your mind. You did this. You did this. So the enemy used her words against me. Like, you did this.
How can God love someone who would do such a thing?
Yeah. And the guilt, man, the shame that was there. When that happened and I came home that night, I completely took myself away from the map, pretty much. I blocked everyone. I got out of social media, and I said, I'm done with people. People are not going to find me. Who cares what happens at this point? You know, I don't want to talk to nobody because of the intensity of the shame and the guilt that I felt.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want anybody to know, because now her parents know. Now who else knows that's going to know after that?
Yeah.
And so I pretty much said I blocked. The only people that I didn't block was my sister and her. That's it.
You blocked everybody else.
But everybody else was blocked.
Parents, siblings, everybody.
Her family was blocked.
Did your family know what happened?
Eventually, yeah.
I told her. I didn't. Let me backtrack. I didn't tell her. I had my dad tell her, because I didn't know how to tell my mother-in-law what her son was doing.
Right.
And so my mom couldn't get a hold of me, so
That made her panic. So she reached out to me. Where's my son? Where is she? And I didn't know how to answer her.
So then my sister later on, she messages me.
Yeah.
She's the only one that I didn't block. And I didn't block her purposely because I knew she would eventually message me. And I wanted to at least give my parents a peace of mind.
That you're okay.
That I'm okay. But I didn't want to speak to them directly.
Yeah.
You know, I would feel more comfortable talking to my sister.
Right. Now to just backtrack for a minute. At the time when this happens, is Bob showing you were saying, Kirsten, does are you still going through your struggles at that time, or you were past that by this point?
I was still in it.
Yeah.
I was still in it. Which is why I didn't know where his mindset was, so I told myself, my struggle, in case he wanted to use it against me.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't know his mindset at that time. I didn't know what he was thinking about. I didn't know if he was going to wipe the bank account and go. I didn't know if he was going to take me to court and, well, my struggle is this, but so is hers. And I didn't want that to happen to my mother. So I told my mother before anybody had a chance to say anything. And
wow.
Yeah. And that was actually the hardest thing I have ever done, because I swore I would take it to the grave that I would never tell my mother. I would never tell my mother. I swore that I would never tell her. And then I was forced to. Or I felt like I was forced to.
Wow.
You know, and like I was saying, isolation at that time when we were both separated, it quickly caused me to be depressed, you know, like I said before. And I would be lying if I said that suicide didn't cross my mind, because I was at that point, I was at my lowest point at that time. One of the things that actually kept me from not doing anything was the thought of my daughter Sophia, because I didn't want to do that to her. And just, I don't think I had it in me really to do anything. But I would be lying if I say that the thought never crossed my mind, because I certainly did think about it, because I was that alone, that depressed. But I didn't want to find out what I was capable of doing, because it was only day one and I was already feeling like this, you know. And looking back at those text messages where I expressed to her how alone I felt, she had every right to tell me, you deserve this, right? She had every right to tell me, you brought this on yourself, right? She had every right to say, again, you did this.
I had every right to say I was done.
She had every right to say, I'm done, don't talk to me ever again.
Right.
Wow.
You know, she had every right to do that.
Biblically, I
Biblically
was able.
speaking, and
I was.
And because of everything that went, she had every right to tell me.
Yeah.
When I told her how alone I felt, wouldn't you think that the normal response would be, you deserve this, you brought this on yourself? But when I told her that I was by myself, that I felt so isolated and depressed, the words that came out of her mouth were so Christ-like, because she said, "You still have me. You still have me."
Wow.
Instead of saying, "I hate you," instead of saying, "Get away from me," instead of saying, "You deserve this,"
Wow.
she said, "You still have me."
And at that point, I wanted to wring his neck, but I didn't want to lose my husband that I fought for so much. I'm sorry. I didn't want to lose him because I loved him still. Even in that space, I still loved him still.
Of course.
And those first few days were the hardest. And I remember one night I was washing dishes, and I think it was about the fourth night or something around there, you know. And that's when I lost it, you know, that's when I broke down. That's when I said, "God, where are you? You know, why is this happening?" Like, you know, I said, "Where are you in all of this? Why aren't you sure?" Because at the, you know, remember how I said I felt so cold? I've been feeling so cold for so long. I didn't even know when was the last time I genuinely felt the touch of God, because I've been living in sin for so long. I've been living a double life for so long. And I've been okay with it. I've ignored the warning signs, and I've gotten to this now where I'm at my lowest point, and I didn't know what to feel. I didn't feel anything. And so I cried out to God and said, "God, where are you? Why, you know, why am I here? Why is this happening?" And at that moment, instantly, I felt a warm touch right here on my shoulder, like a warm sensation. And it was almost as if it was the hand of God, right? Just putting his hand on me. And it wasn't like the presence of God, you know, when you're at church and you worship, you immediately feel the presence of God over your entire body. It wasn't like that. It was a small sensation, like, you know, just like when you put your hand on somebody's shoulder. And when I felt that, immediately, I was already crying, but I started weeping when I felt that, because that was the first time in a long time that I had felt the touch of God.
Wow.
And that's what I needed, because I was already so deep in my sin. I was already so deep in my addiction, and my thought was like, how could I deserve this? You know, how could I deserve love? How could I deserve God's forgiveness? How could I deserve her forgiveness? But God showed me, even though I ignored the signs, even though I rebelled against him and my family, God showed me, I'm still right here with you. You know, I was alone. I had nobody, okay? But God said, I'm right here.
Wow. Praise God.
And that's what I needed. And from that moment, that was actually my breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
That's what actually turned everything around. That moment was what I needed. That moment of being alone. And see, this goes back to going, what the enemy means for evil, God will turn for good.
Mm-hmm.
Where the enemy had me in isolation. And the enemy wanted me alone, and the enemy wanted me depressed, and the enemy wanted me right where he had me. But then God showed up, right? In my darkness, in my loneliness, and he touched me just one time, with just one touch. It was all I needed. Wow. And what we were talking about earlier, about the woman with the issue of blood, all she needed was that touch from God. Mm-hmm. And her problem that she's been struggling with 10, 12 years with the issue of blood, instantly healed. Yeah. So if God can do that with her, yeah, God can do that with anyone. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe that that's what God did. That touch on my shoulder was what I needed, was my breaking point, was my breakthrough.
Amen.
And, you know, from then, everything just turned around. And, you know, and maybe that's why it was only 10 days. You know, because that was around day 4. And I'm not going to say that the rest of the days were easier, that everything just, you know, like nothing happened. No, it was difficult. But the shame...
Still, there was repairing, there was building.
But the shame was gone. The guilt was gone. You know, the feeling of condemnation was not there anymore.
And I think that's the problem as believers, that where we find Christ talking about, you know, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, because that's what keeps you stuck. Condemnation, guilt, and shame. Those are the 3 things that the enemy always likes to manipulate and utilize to keep us in a space of bitterness, burden. I can attest to myself, you know. But isn't it a beautiful feeling when that's removed?
Yeah.
When there is no more shame, there is no more guilt, there's no more bitterness.
Yeah.
And it is just that touch, that shoulder touch. What a powerful demonstration of God's power.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you go back and you see, man, but Lord, why would you have to put me through that? And I know that maybe those were moments in your, you know, moments even leading up to now that you probably asked yourself, Lord, why couldn't it have been another way? Why did it have to be me almost losing my
bombshell?
Yeah, why did it have to be me almost losing my practically losing my credibility with that group? Feeling embarrassed at the fact that I did this. Something that I didn't want certain people in my space to know. I know that feeling. When you just feel embarrassed about this internal struggle of things, right? Because it's like, I don't mind being embarrassed by myself. But when people that I love now come and see this thing that I'm embarrassed about, you know, it hurts. You know, it's things that I can't even begin to imagine that those 10 days, with the 4th being the touch of God, but those days of, I lost credibility. I lost my wife, my daughter, you know, friendships, and I'm by myself in this dark house.